Okay, fifth grade. So, like I said in the introduction video for this week, we're going to take a little break from looking specifically at folk music that is popular in American history, and we're going to look at some composers and a couple. These guys actually used a little bit of folk music in what they were doing, but these are some American composers who have definitely made quite the impact on the musical world throughout history. So let's start with our August composer, Leonard Bernstein. Okay, so Leonard Bernstein is actually so famous he's got his own website. No, he is no longer with us anymore. He was actually born on August the 25th of 1819. So that was quite some time ago that he was born. So going back to his website here. So just a little bit information about him. He was a composer, but he also was extremely famous as a conductor. And now, conductor is someone who keeps the orchestra, the choir, whoever's singing together as the music is played. So he's a conductor. He's also an educator, very well known for putting together a series of concerts called the Young People's Concerts, where he invited young people and their parents to come in. He would pick some kind of music topic, like who is Igor Stravinsky, which is a Russian composer who lived at about the same time that Bernstein did. And they would talk about his history and play snippets of his music, or he would do something like what is comedy in music. So and they would go into, he would give a lecture, and he was also going to play songs. His orchestra would play songs that gave examples of what he was talking about, how music can be funny in the classical role. So if we all go over here to classicsforkids.com, we can see that Leonard Bernstein grew up in Lawrence, Massachusetts, in the Boston area. Boston, even though he was born in Lawrence, he grew up in the Boston area. His father sold wigs and beauty supplies. He wanted Leonard to take over the business, but Leonard had other ideas. He did have a nickname of Lenny, so his good friends called him Lenny. He did compose the class song for his graduation, so you can see that composing music was something that was just in his bones for most of his, well, pretty much all his life. He majored in music at the School of Music at Harvard University, very prestigious, very like big time college in our country. I think it's one of the oldest, if not the oldest college in our country. Been around since even before America was actually an independent country of its own. Now, at 25 years old, Leonard Bernstein found himself as an assistant conductor. He had been an assistant conductor for the New York Philharmonic. And there was one concert that they were doing at Carnegie Hall in New York, where the regular composer, the full-time one who actually did it, Bernstein was just there to do a few rehearsals as an assistant conductor, and he stepped in if at any point the head conductor wasn't able to conduct a concert. And so at the last minute, the conductor turned up sick, wasn't going to be able to do the concert, so Bernstein took over. And it just so happened that this particular performance was being broadcast over radio. Now, back in that time period, there really wouldn't have been TV to speak of. TV itself wasn't invented until 1925. And so this would have taken place, let's do a little math. Like, he was born in 1918. He was 25 when all of this happened, so that would have been 1943. So TV had not been invented, so a form of entertainment would have been either you go to what they called moving picture show, the early days of movies, or you would listen to it on the radio. So this particular concert was being broadcast on the radio, so families all across America were listening to this, and he made such an impression at the live concert and over the radio. They just loved his energy, they loved his wit and his humor, that the New York Philharmonic kind of sort of fired the other guy and named him the full-time director. And another interesting fact, he was actually the first American to become the full-time conductor of a major American orchestra. You would think with it being an American orchestra that it would have been nothing but American conductors. No, most of the, well, up until this point, conductors were from countries over in Europe, and they would immigrate to America and become conductors of these major orchestras at that time period. So Bernstein, moral of the story, was the first American conductor to become a permanent conductor of a major American orchestra. And not too long after that, of course, TV was invented in the early 1950s. So he started using TV as a way to broadcast his orchestra's performances, and also that's when we see the creation of the young people's concert, where he would bring classical music to all these students all over America. He was also really well known for composing musical theater. Things like Wonderful Town, On the Town, and his most famous West Side Story, which is sort of based on Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. You've got two star-crossed people who are just absolutely in love, but they come from very different backgrounds, and the people in their lives don't think they should be together, and they have to fight to be together, and it doesn't turn out as well as you would like it to have turned out. But it's a great musical, lots of amazing music in it. So let's watch a video now that's going to give us a little bit more information about Bernstein. Okay, so we're going to jump into this really cool place called 5 Minute Mozart. They put out a lot of great videos about composers, and we're going to learn a little bit more about Leonard Bernstein and his life. Here we go.
Leonard Bernstein was born on October 25th, 1918 in Lawrence, Massachusetts.
And this guy said, I just noticed that, he said October 25th, but Bernstein's birthday was actually August 25th. So I'm going to fact check them on that. It was August, not October.
He studied composition at Harvard University and conducting at the Curtis Institute in Philadelphia. Bernstein was such a talented student and so well-liked that a fellow student deemed him doomed to success. After graduating, Bernstein became the assistant conductor of the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. In 1944, Bernstein composed On the Town. The musical would run for 463 performances and paved the way for Bernstein to make his mark on Broadway. Perhaps his most famous work is the Broadway musical West Side Story, composed in 1957. To show
And the song that you're hearing playing in the background right now is actually the song I Feel Pretty, that is sung by one of the main characters, Maria, in the West Side Story musical.
It was adapted to film and cemented Bernstein's legacy as we know it today. Bernstein also composed ballets as well as symphonies. In addition to composing, he also conducted operas, working at the Metropolitan Opera House as well as many other famous opera houses around the world. Bernstein married Chilean actress Felicia Montealegre Cohn in 1951, and together they had 3 children. Leonard Bernstein passed away on October 14, 1990 in New York City, New York, at the age of 72.
Maybe that's why he said October for the birth month instead of August, because he passed away in October, but was actually born in August, okay? So now we're going to move into your next composer. This is actually also an American composer, an American female composer, as a matter of fact. Okay, so Amy Beach is a very famous composer. Her maiden name is Chaney. Before she got married, upon marriage though, she took the last name Beach. She was born on September the 5th of 1867. She was well known for a lot of firsts in music. She was the first female composer to have a symphony performed by a major orchestra. She was the first U.S. composer to have her music be recognized by Europe, and the absolute first classical U.S. composer to achieve success without the benefit of studying music abroad over in Europe. A lot of times these composers from America will go to the Paris Conservatory to study music, Rome, Vienna, all these places over in Europe, but she studied in America. And so she was literally the first classical U.S. composer to achieve success without having been overseas to study with the top composers in the field at that time. Now, like many of the composers that we talk about, she was also a child prodigy, meaning she showed a very enormous talent at music at a very early age. She made her first public performance in 1883 playing piano. This is also the year that she published some of her first compositions. 1885, she performed with the Boston Symphony. And at that same year, she actually married Dr. Beach. He was a surgeon, and that's thus her last name changed to Beach. He wasn't too keen on her doing a lot of performances, so she kind of dialed back her performance gigs, I guess, a little bit so that she could focus on family a little bit more. Even though he wasn't necessarily discouraging, he thought she should be at home. She did still compose, though. She focused a lot more on composing during that time period. She only had one performance a year, and because she's such a great person, she donated all the proceeds from the performances to charity. Her husband did pass away in 1910, and when that happened, she picked up back her performing career and actually toured around Europe, where she was very, very popular over in Europe. Her music and performance capabilities were already well known before she ever got there. And you can see here in this paragraph, they list off some of the compositions that she's done. She's done symphonies, written music for pianos, she's written music for string instruments, written music for whole orchestras, vocal stuff, solo singers and piano. Now, during the end of her life, she spent most of her summers composing at the MacDowell Colony, and the rest of her time she spent in New York City. Some of the time she spent at Cape Cod, her home in Centerville in Massachusetts. And when she passed away, she had published, at that point in her life, 300 pieces of music. And this woman was like, she was always working. She was always composing. And whenever she passed away, before she passed away, she said that the MacDowell Colony, as her estate executor, meaning they took care of all her, like her home stuff inside her house when she passed away, and all her monies that she had put up in the bank at that point. And they used that to aid the operation at the colony. And the colony was, think of it as kind of a retirement home for composers. Okay, so now we're going to visit a popular YouTuber that I like. She has a show, a YouTube channel called Piano TV, and she does a lot of videos on very famous composers, different piano ideas, and she did this video here about several women composers, including Amy Beach. So let's look in and see what else she can tell us about Miss Beach.
American composer from a more modern era. She was born in 1867 and had mainly a romantic style to her music. Until her later years, she started getting more of like a modern atonal bent. But anyway, she was basically a prodigy straight from birth. Her passion for music made her basically a force of nature not to be reckoned with. She was really strong-willed, so it was kind of like a theme since she was a small child. At age 4, she was already being a little bossy with music. She was composing, and even if she wasn't around a piano to compose, she was super determined and would just like write songs in her head. Like Fanny Mendelssohn.
So did you catch that? That she was composing music at 4 years old, people. Okay, so when we say child prodigy, we mean child prodigy. She was doing stuff at a very early age.
Amy Beach encountered stigma about being a performer as a woman, but she didn't let that stand in her way. Amy was giving public recitals as early as age 7, and she had rave reviews her whole life. She was a really well-respected performer. Her parents, they didn't really believe in putting her in a music conservatory. It just wasn't, I don't know, maybe it wasn't ladylike enough. So Amy only ever really had 1 year of formal training. Everything else that she learned, she taught herself. She studied Bach, she learned counterpoint, she learned harmony, and she even undertook a project to translate a French treatise on orchestration by Berlioz because it was such a crucial educational work. When Amy was married in 1885, she agreed to her husband's terms to become like a matron of society, which meant that she wasn't supposed to do a lot of public performing. She had to put her focus on composing instead and just limit the performances. And she wasn't allowed to teach because teaching piano is for peasants, I guess. But once her husband died, which was pretty young, Amy got to spend the rest of her life enjoying more freedoms, and she just kind of took charge of her own destiny. She played a lot of recitals, she traveled and she toured, and she continued to earn her reputation as the top female composer in America at the time. She taught, she coached, she wrote papers for journals and newspapers, she did public speaking. Like, this woman was a really driven, focused intellectual. One thing that Amy was also really fond of was empowering women to learn music, which wasn't something that people really focused on at the time, but she was a part of a few societies that were dedicated specifically to that cause. So power to you, sister. The piece I'd like to show you by Amy Beach is from her 4 sketches, Opus 15. The particular one we're going to be listening to is called Dreaming. It's hard to read there, but it says Dreaming. It's a really sentimental piece, and it has almost like a vibe of Liszt in it. So each of the 4 sketches are entirely worth listening to. You should check out the whole thing, especially as a piano player. Phantoms is a really good waltz. Autumn gives you kind of the feel of swirling leaves, and Fireflies is probably the most famous one. It's a study in really intense, fast playing.
So that's all she had on Amy Beach. So don't forget, what you need to do now is take your quiz. What next week we're going to jump back into looking at some songs that have been made famous through American history. But for now, what I need you to do is jump in, take your quiz. The quiz is linked in the description below this video on YouTube. You can also jump over to my website if you came from over there and click the link for the quiz that way. Or you can also go to this week's folder in Schoology, and you'll see the quiz embedded below this week's lesson video. So however you get there, make sure you get there and get your quiz done. I really appreciate all of you who are keeping up with your music lessons. You are awesome. I can't wait to see you guys again in person. But until then, I'll see you next week. Bye.